Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Gray Maybe podcast. If you are new, welcome. If you are just coming back, I'm glad you decided to. And if you're a hardcore junkie, I really appreciate you coming again and again and again. And I love hearing your feedback on all of the episodes. It keeps me going. It makes me know that I'm not just speaking out to the void. So thank you for that. Today, I have a very, very excellent guest for the pod. This guest comes to me through Dana Wilson. If you don't know who Dana Wilson is, she's a lovely, lovely person in the dance community who is a very accomplished dancer, choreographer, person, dance educator, and also has a podcast called Words That Move Me, specifically for dancers, but honestly, I think anybody can kind of get hip to it. But I met this individual through Dana Wilson originally. We have kept in touch, and we have also very much met over and over again through Masterclass Monday, which is an event that I co-produce and produce. It is a masterclass series for professional dancers. My guest today is a dancer, a actor, a choreographer, mostly on stage and screen, and also a dance educator. This person is non-binary, so the they, them pronouns are how we will address. So, Cat Heinen, welcome to the pod.
Hello, interwebs. It is good to be here.
And Heinen, I said the last name right. Is that
You did. You
okay?
nailed it on the first try.
We see everybody's last names now a lot because of the interwebs, but I have no idea how to pronounce anybody's last names because I don't hear them. Like, I just see them. So it's like my best guess. And I probably could have asked you before we did this, your last name. That would have been a nice professional thing to do. But, you know, I'm just not that on it today.
But you went and hit it out of the park.
I did think I could see it, and I could have just let it roll. I didn't have to do all that, but I did. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here today, for giving me some of your very precious time today. So one of the things that I do a little bit every once in a while for the pod is I like to ask for general feedback, either like what kind of topics or subjects do people want to hear? And then sometimes I'll throw out a little story like, hey, who has experience in this realm? And then people will inbox me. This was one of those things because the topic of the season, abuse, which is just general abuse, it's kind of hard to pinpoint people because it's interesting. I feel like it's rampant everywhere, and I feel like so many people have stories about abuse, but it's not talked about a ton outwardly, right? So when I did the first season of like the abortion season, it was very much like a social experiment. Who through hearing will come out and do this, because I know a ton of people who had that experience, but I didn't know who was willing to talk about it. And then the second season with all the body stuff, I know people through programs that have that experience, so I could reach out to a lot of people. And then there were some people who hit me up that became part of the podcast. The third season, you know, grief, I knew a ton of people. Like, that one's very outwardly. People feel usually pretty comfortable in saying what they're grieving for the most part. The experience of grief, obviously not so comfortable. So this season with abuse, like, I know people who have been in abusive situations, but for some reason it's harder for me to be like, hey, you want to talk about your abuse? Like, I mean, all of my seasons are a little bit like that. But you did DM me and you were like, hey, I have a story. And I was like, oh my God, yes, Kat, because my experiences with you, although have been limited, they have been very very personal. My interactions with you,
brief but charged.
Yes,
you know?
That's a really good way of putting it. So when I saw you inbox, I'm like, oh yes, please, Kat, yes, this would be amazing. So without too much extra further ado, first of all, I want you to add on to anything that I might have not hit, any of the boxes I didn't hit, anything you want to add, your own hello to the world.
I mean, you nailed all the boxes of, all the multifaceted things an artist can be, an actor, dancer, choreographer. But I also have to teach children to pay the bills and, sometimes work retail to pay the bills.
Yes.
All those fun jobs that you just all of a sudden get experience in because you have to.
Yeah.
And
yes,
a showgirl.
Yes.
Recently too.
Okay. And this is, I love a showgirl because I'm a showgirl.
You do love a showgirl.
So I love showgirl stuff. So I've been seeing that on your what is it? Your grid. sound
Yes,
so
I
old. Oh my
am
God.
loving it. The
I love
satin
it.
dolls
I
all over
know.
Los
Okay, I'm
Angeles
gonna put
and
them.
internationally. They're very talented singers and dancers. And it's actually going to be our 20th anniversary this year. So it's
Amazing.
really cool to have this um, woman who just loves pinup
Yeah.
and loves creating shows for the talented dancers and singers she knows and has built this company. So,
I love these types of companies. This is the closest thing, people, that you will
yes.
get to a troupe. Everybody always asks us, "Are you in a
Yes.
troupe?" Like, I don't like, ever since I became a professional dancer 20 some years ago, everyone's always like, "Are you in a troupe?" And I'm like, I don't even know what that is. Like, what is a dance troupe? Like, where do they work? How does this happen? Why
But
have I
it
never
is.
auditioned for a troupe? But there are like these new little like production companies, right? That hire people, and oftentimes you're hiring the same people over and over again because you know the numbers, you know the routine, you're
Right.
predictable, you could be counted on, you're responsible, you're professional, all those things. So there is a lot of these little entertainment companies, and I think they're so valuable to performers because they do kind of like their little gig jobs that you can make good money, that you're doing what you love to do, and they're fun. You get to travel
Right.
sometimes or meet a lot of people. I love that you're in the Satin Dolls. Shout out to Satin
It's
Dolls
so
20th
fun.
anniversary. Congratulations. It's so hard to
Yes.
have a small business for even a year, let alone 20 years. So that's like a no small feat, especially in the entertainment business. We've had our ups and downs, and mostly downs lately, over and over again. COVID, strikes, just
Hmm.
underlying kind of entertainment recession. So that's like amazing. I love that. I love seeing it on your grid. Um, and also shout out to side jobs because it takes the pressure off your art. So if you're an
Yes.
artist, no shame in side jobs. Always get something to pay the bills. Always have your hands in multiple baskets to keep making different sources of income. It does, expand your skill set. It also, dance is a transferable skill. There are a lot of skills you learn in dance
Yes.
that can be applied to a lot of different things. So know that, keep it in your heart as confidence. And I love that you talk about that because it's important for everybody to do. And I think it takes pressure off of your art so that you can be more successful in it personally.
Yes.
Um, okay. All of that said, Kat's a multi hyphenate. She's got all this stuff. She hit me up in my DMs and said
They
she's
hit
got.
you up, but yes,
Oh, thank you.
you got it.
Thank you for
Yes.
correcting me. I'm trying to work
Boom.
on this
Got you.
so much. It's
It's a practice,
it's
It
a
really is.
practice, and I want to be better at it. And more than anything, I don't want to have to think. I'm like, why don't I just say people's names? Like, I don't need, for people who struggle with they
Sometimes
them
that's,
pronouns, just say people's
yeah.
names. Just get in the habit of
Hmm.
saying people's names. And it's not it's then it's never, you never have to really do anything different. But
Agreed.
it is a practice. I wish I was better at it. I am working on it every day. And thank you for the correction. We're
I
keeping that
got you.
in so that everybody can learn to make that correction as well. So you hit me up in the DMs. You said, I have
I
a
did.
story. I kind of gave a little bit like, hey, give me a little taste of what that story is for
Hmm.
me and the producers' ears only.
Yes,
And you
the
gave
the
me a
log line of abuse.
yes, right? Thank you. And you did, and I was like, this is perfect. Because I've noticed when I say a broad topic of abuse, that can mean so many things to so many people. And people can act abusive, or you can have like experiences of where something felt abusive or you experienced it as abuse. It may not be completely in alignment with what I'm doing on this show. So I appreciate that little extra line. Uh, so, Kat, will you maybe give us a little bit about your story or your experience with abuse?
Sure. Um, I'm going to be talking about a an emotionally abusive and verbally abusive relationship I had in high school um, that lasted about a year and um, really affected my relationship with intimacy and sex. Um, and I realized in reflecting on this relationship that was 10 plus years ago, there's been a lot of separation from it, and even more separation from the fact that I realized the first 3 or 4 people I had any kind of intimate encounter with all harassed or assaulted me.
Wow.
And that realization was part of why I was like, oh, maybe I need to talk about this with people, because that shouldn't be normal. And it shouldn't take me over 10 years to realize that that's kind of messed up.
Yeah.
And it didn't set me up for success, to have these experiences when I was 14, 15, because by the time I was in high school and feeling ready for a relationship, I fell in love with someone who I was ready to save.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of mentality fits right into the cycle of abuse, of creating this dependency that both this person needs me to save them, and they can do whatever they want because they know I'm going to stay.
Right.
And so it's taken a lot of unpacking and unlearning that
Mm-hmm.
in the last couple years, being out of college and just being, an adult in the world, um, to look back on this and realize that's not normal. And I really don't want anyone else to be growing up and thinking that's normal.
Thank you for that. And I specifically relate to your experience. Just even like, I don't even need to know more. I want to know more. I'm going to ask
Mm-hmm.
more. But
Right.
because I also had a very abusive relationship when I was a teenager for a couple of years, like around 15, 16, 17.
Mm-hmm.
And I know how much that affects, an already brittle self confidence of a teenage girl,
Right.
especially if you have, a questionable family dynamic. One for myself was built in kind of chaos of a certain member, having alcoholism, and then people walking on eggshells and very like ragey, very emotionally
Mm-hmm.
abusive also there. So I was kind of like primed for that. I already was used to someone raging at me or being unpredictable or, being hot and cold and, getting emotional abuse. That was all like very normal to me. So it was not surprising that I found someone to reflect that back to me in a romantic relationship. um, I also had hyper responsibility, right? Like this hyper responsibility
Mm-hmm.
that I'm responsible for everybody else's feelings and emotions and that I can somehow fix it if I act a certain way, do a certain thing, or if I'm a good enough girl or a bad enough girl or whatever those girls are, or they,
Right.
them, he, she, like all of it.
All the martyr
Yeah,
complexes
whatever the
of
martyr complex is of how can
being
I
a
be.
people pleaser is universal.
That's the word right there, big time
Yeah.
people pleaser. And
Being a people pleaser, not wanting to break any of those eggshells, wanting to keep the peace,
yes,
just wanting to project towards others, because if others are okay, then you'll be okay.
yes. And that, my friends, is the very definition of codependency. Like,
Yep.
so if
Turns
that,
out.
yeah. So if you're like, oh yeah, that really resonates. I need you to look up codependency, do a little Googie search on that, read up on it. There's Coda. There's like a 12-step program called Codependencies. Like that's a really good one if you don't know where to start. And I'm sure there's many books on the topic. But that is the definition of codependency. I even wrote it down as you're talking. I'm like, yes, that is a thing. It's
Mhm.
a very toxic situation to be in, especially long term. It just really burns people out, you know.
Right.
Um, and like the power dynamic of a relationship like this is off, right? If you're constantly trying to get power back or losing your power or feeling like you don't have the power and that person constantly does, and they're kind of always in charge of how everything goes through manipulation or, and there's many ways to manipulate. I don't even need to break
Right.
it down. Like the power dynamic is off. And I just want to say this to any teens or young people or old people or whoever might be listening. Like, if you feel power, like if you feel that there is a power dynamic in the relationship, that's not good. Like
There shouldn't be one.
there shouldn't be one. It shouldn't feel like that at all. It shouldn't feel like they have the power right now. I have the power. How do I get my power back? They have the power. It shouldn't feel like a tennis game of power.
Mm-mm.
It just shouldn't. It's not a. It's actually like something that just you don't. It's like music that doesn't play. You just don't hear it. It's not there in a good
Right.
relationship. I'm going to stop talking. I'm talking too much. So please continue. Talk about whatever you want to talk about this situation. Because I'm not familiar with your
Hmm.
story. I do have a lot of relatability, but I'm not familiar.
Um, let's see. High school, yes. Um, I don't want to give too much
You
information
don't.
away
You
that
don't. You
would
can. You can.
identify
Yes.
this
Yes. You can. You
person.
can talk about like in my abusive relationship, for instance, I fell in love with someone who wasn't really who they were. They presented themselves as very different. I fell in love with that version. And then when they would turn, I clung to a certain version of them that I thought I really liked. For instance, and then there was, a lot of fighting, a lot of emotional abuse. There was some physical abuse. And by then I was so addicted to this person's being with me and the approval and hanging on to how I originally saw them that I was just really, it was like full
Right.
addiction for me.
Cool. Can I say
Yes.
it's a man? Is that
Yes, yes, you can say
that's
whatever
okay, great.
you can say
Okay.
whatever you
That
want and
part.
then we'll pull out anything identifiable. Like just be
I
free.
see.
We'll get you.
Great.
We got your back.
Great. Um, so one of my friends in high school, we became very, very close, and he presented himself in a very specific way, and I knew he had a partner at the time, and he would tell me stories about their sex life, and he um, made it seem like he was this super experienced, put together uh, person who just knew what was going on. And we became very, very close friends. And at one point, because we were 16, we thought it'd be funny to date as a bit, right? Super funny. We're just going to trick our friends into thinking we're dating, but we're not actually dating. Of course, that turns into real dating. And after 1 or 2 months, I'm in love with my best friend.
Mm-hmm.
I is how I feel, and I am like 16, 17, and I am actually the one who initiated, like, I'm ready to lose my virginity. I want to do this. I want this to happen with you, because you're so experienced and I trust you. I found out maybe 8, 9 months into the relationship that he had been a virgin that whole time and that I was actually his first.
You're like, this is not what I signed up for. This
I was
is,
like,
I,
hold
hold on,
on.
hold on. This is
What?
buyer's remorse. This is
What do you mean?
misrepresentation.
We both don't know what we're doing. That can't be. I don't
Oh,
want that. But because sex and intimacy did become a specific language with us, that became kind of the only way we knew how to communicate at a certain point. Um, Not because it was good, not because I liked it, but because he told me it was the only way for him to stay and for me to be of any use to him.
oh, that's lovely.
And at that point, 7, 8, 9 months into being in love with someone, I'm like, oh, he needs me. How sweet is that?
Yeah. So in your mind, you're like, to be needed, I need to be sexual.
Right.
Yeah.
In order to be with this guy I clearly love and who definitely loves me for who I am, I need to just shut up and take it.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
And that being your first time having sex messes with you when
Mm-hmm.
you then go out into the world and start having sex with other people.
100%. And I said need, but I want to interchange that with want because, I think a lot of
I
us
like that.
mistaken being wanted for being like it would be
Yes.
healthy to be wanted. It's unhealthy to be needed. But I think those of us
Yes.
who do have like a lot of over responsibility, hyper responsibility, we mix up those things and it's like, no, I need to be needed. It's like, no, you want to be wanted and that's fine and that's
Hmm.
normal. But being
Being
needed,
wanted is normal.
yes, like I need to be needed in that sense, like that is not healthy, right? So I
That is not
also
what people are for.
no, no, to fix the wounds and fill the empty
Yes.
space. No, not so much. Um, thank you for being so transparent about this because this also played in my relationship. I relate so much to what you're saying. It's
Hmm.
insane because I also had that my abuser was my first experience and I wanted that and I chose it. And my first experience was really, actually, really great. It morphed, though, into this thing where
Mm.
sex was power. Like, I,
Yes.
I wielded it as power in that relationship. He wielded it as power in that relationship. And after that relationship, I went out into the world and used it as power. Like, I used it as if I'm happy with you, you will get this. If I'm unhappy with this, you will not. And on top of that, if and this one took me a long time to figure out if someone the minute I felt comfortable with someone I was no longer interested in them sexually, like
Ooh.
my interest, my sexual desire for them went away. Like the nicer they were to me, the more healthy of a partner they were, the more disinterested I became sexually. And that was not a great thing. I mean, it's like a great thing to learn about yourself, but it's terrible because the good relationships I would get in, I would sabotage because
Right.
I would then become like not interested in sex at all, which is like, that's fine if that's true and that's who you are, but like, that's then for the other person, not necessarily something that's so great, especially if you can't figure out why you're doing that. You're just like doing it and
Hmm.
you're unconscious. So, anyways, again, I'm going to
It's
stop
easy to
talking.
get stuck in that cycle, though.
Yes. Oh, 100%. It was like natural to me.
Hmm.
I was not even aware of it. It took a long time for me to become aware of it. And it took me a long time to then like work through it, see that that's where it came from. Kind of like similar to when someone might recognize that they're addicted to drama, right? Like someone who always
Right.
has like really dramatic relationships, and then all of a sudden you're in like a very peaceful, calm, powerless, like no dynamic of power relationship. But they're like, I don't know, they're just like boring, and it's like, yeah, because you're like addicted to the drama of it and the
So now you want to sabotage what's good
right,
and what's calm
right.
so that you can go back to the comfort of the chaos.
Right. So now, as you're kind of going through this, I know for me in my story, there were things that would happen over and over again in a cycle. Like if I didn't do things that this person wanted, the punishment would be pouting, manipulation, threats of breakup,
Hmm.
deserting. This person would like desert me places. I talked about it in my first episode, but like, because he would always have the car he drove before me. We would go someplace and then he would just leave and he would not tell me. He would just leave, and I would be there like without a car, without a phone, because this is in the '90s, and I would just be like have to stay there until at some point would pick me up or like show up again, and I would have no idea where he went. Like it was really psychologically fucked
And
up.
it creates a literal dependency
Yes.
on him.
So that when he shows back up, I was happy to see him because I was in such a survival state. I
And he
would,
can be the savior.
yes, 100%. Like, where is anybody seeing that? Anybody seeing the create a problem and then coming to save it? Anybody
Whoa.
seeing the problem, creating the problem and coming to save it? TikTok, anybody?
Mm.
Is this thing on?
Crazy.
Um,
Crazy. Oh, I've never seen that before.
you've never seen it. Okay, we're
Not
getting off
even
topic.
once.
I'm taking us off topic. Back to you. Back to you and your story, not about me and everything else, I believe. So, were there things like that that you feel comfortable sharing? Um, like I think it's helpful for people if you feel comfortable sharing it to hear those things because I think people identify and they're like, "Oh, that happened to me. Oh, that happened to
Right.
me," or I recognize that.
There was a lot of manipulation that happened over text and verbally. Um, Things like, I don't know what I'm going to do to myself if you don't XYZ.
The suicide
Um,
threats. The suicide
Set
threats.
threats of suicide, threats of
Yeah.
harming
Yeah.
himself, threats of going out and drinking. And at the time, we were 17. I was a goody two shoes. I had never taken a sip of alcohol, and I hated it. I was like, I don't want to try it until I'm 21.
Hmm.
That's where I was at that point in high school. And I hated when he smoked cigarettes. I hated when he drank. And so he would threaten to go out and do those things. Or he would call me and then not answer for hours and hours and hours and hours. And then text or call me once I was really concerned and had called him back to be like, where are you? Why are you not answering? What's happening? Once I was then in that panic state, then he would come back at me with the, sorry, I was just so drunk. Sorry, I yelled at you on the phone. I was just this. Sorry, I did that. But it wasn't until I came running back, needing him to be okay, that he would give me the safety of, yes, I'm still here for you.
Right.
But there were so many times where I would just get a text that says, you you didn't give me a blowjob when I asked you to, so goodbye forever.
Oh my gosh.
And then 8 hours go by. What am I supposed to do with that?
You're like, and then, yeah, so there's so many things mixed up in that, right? The threat, the I don't
The
care if that's
threat.
something you want to do or not. Like, so it's
And it's your fault
rapey.
if this
Yeah.
happens.
So hyper responsibility. And then also like the lack of like the the ghosting, right? The non-communication at
Right.
all, which is like also like really immobilizing. Like what's the word I'm looking like instability. It gives you so much like
Yeah.
you just feel off
The
kilter.
carpet's
Yes.
shaking, or
Yeah.
the eggshells are
Destabilizing.
twitching.
Yeah. Just
Yes.
destabilizing.
Purposefully
Yeah.
destabilizing in order to stabilize it
Yes.
and make me feel protected.
Yes.
When in
Wow.
fact, every time I was with him, I felt so, so unsafe.
Yeah.
In hindsight, like, there were red flags in my body. My chest would tighten, my pelvic muscles would resist.
Mm.
I was constantly anxious
Mm.
and depressed,
Mm-hmm.
and I couldn't figure out why.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and even when I did do what he wanted, he would still text me, you looked really fat in this. And he
Oh.
would make it about my body.
Mm.
And that brought on a pattern of disordered eating, that my friends very quickly recognized. And thank God they did what I did not want to do. And they went to our guidance counselor and forced me to go to therapy.
Oh my gosh. And at the time, I'm sure that was like such a uh, betrayal from your friends, right?
Oh my
Like
God.
you're
I
like,
was
I can't
so
believe
mad.
so mad, right? But of course, now
So
as an
mad at them.
adult looking back, you're like, they were so sweet to do that to me and
And
help
like,
me.
they saved me.
Yeah,
And
right.
I'm still with the therapist that I
Amazing.
met when I was in that relationship.
Oh my God, how amazing.
Hmm.
That's so good because people who are familiar with therapy, like if you have to move therapists, it's like moving your house. It's like, I got to
Oh,
pack up all my
yeah.
shit. I got to label it. I got to take it to the next person. I got to start all
And
over.
now
I
we
got to,
gotta unpack it all over
oh, now I got to
again.
tell you where the pictures need to be hanged and then
Yeah.
see if this fits there anymore. It doesn't
You
fit there
gotta learn all the
anymore.
characters. Here's all
You have to,
the habits. Here's my
yes,
stack of
here's my
health
background.
history.
Yes, yes. So that's so lovely that you have
Yeah.
that.
It did take a minute to find the right therapist, I will
Yeah.
say.
That's good. That's good
Um,
information for people to hear because I think a lot
like,
of times people that their first stop, they're like, it didn't work for me. My therapist was blah, blah,
right.
blah. And I'm like, that sounds like a terrible therapist. You know, like,
Yes. There are people who are bad at their jobs,
yes,
unfortunately.
every job has people who are not good at it and or people who aren't a good fit. Like, People have certain
Right.
necessities that you need, and you can be very clear about what you're looking for. Like if you are very politically minded like myself, I have to be very clear about who I want, because my values surrounding social issues are really, really strong. I have very strong feelings about that. So I need someone
Mm-hmm.
who, if they can't be completely, what's the word, I guess, like non denominational in that sense,
Sure.
I need to have someone,
Apolitical,
yeah, exactly.
neutral.
Or I need someone who's alignment with me politically, which I would much rather have, because it's the lens and how I deal with things. It's part of my value system. So that's really important to me. But it's the same thing when you're shopping for a therapist. You need to shop like you're shopping for foods you like to eat, right? Don't put
Mm-hmm.
carrots in your basket if you don't like carrots. Don't go to someone, you can interview them like that. And it's really important to get someone that you feel like safe with, that aligns with your value system. Like, and if they don't, find someone else. Like, it's
Yeah,
not,
there are so many out there.
there really is.
There's someone, it's like fish in the sea. There's going to be someone who can
Yes.
help you even for just a period of your life.
Yeah.
I feel very lucky that I, on the fourth or fifth therapist,
Hmm.
found someone who's helped me for over 10 years now.
Did
That is
it,
such a rarity.
it is. Did everyone hear that? The fourth or fifth? Anybody? Does that, okay. If you are someone who's sitting back at me and like, I tried therapy, it didn't work for me. Did you try 4 or 5 different therapists? Probably not. Like, so
Hmm.
definitely don't give up on yourself in that way. Like, if you feel like you could benefit from therapy, and I will just like to say, I think everybody can. Um,
Everyone can.
everybody can.
Everyone can.
Everyone can. So just keep trying, and take recommendations from friends, or do whatever. So the disordered eating stuff, I was also well on my way of disordered eating, big time body dysmorphia.
Hmm.
I think dancing growing up contributed it. It's not my main thing. It's just like something that also I have a personality that lends towards that type of behavior, OCD behavior, obsessive, ruminating stuff. I also, it was like one of my first ways of coping, of feeling powerless, that on top
Hmm.
of, just body dissatisfaction, being a child of the 90s where heroin chic was like really hot and very popular and a source of like attractiveness. So there's a lot of things that contributed to what I think my eating disorder and body dysmorphia that I still have today, that I'm in recovery for. But how much a relationship like this also preys on that and can contribute to it, and even kind of set it
Right.
off, like light the match, right? Um,
And it's used as a tool over time. Like when we were friends, oh, he gave me so many compliments on my body. He made me feel so good about myself. In the first few months of our relationship, when I decided, you're who I want to date and be in love with and have a sexual relationship with, like this is my high school love. Um, all of it just started to morph and shift, and he still talked about my body. It just all of a sudden went from positive to negative.
right.
It became, I love the way you look, to why are you wearing that? I want to look, I want to stand next to someone who looks as good as me.
Mm, wow. Yeah. Right.
And that, oh my gosh, at 17,
Oh, yeah. Well, from
at an all
anyone
girls
too.
high school,
Yeah,
like,
that's someone who loves you to say that to you, like when you want their love and approval and everything, of course.
I remember I sent him a photo of my prom dress. I was so excited to find it.
Hmm.
I was so happy about it. And he just looked and went, "You don't look really sexy in that." And so I bought a new dress.
Oh my God. You
I
loved
made
that
my mom
dress.
take me to another store and buy me another dress that I was never able to wear again because I hated it so
Oh.
much. The
So,
first one I bought, still in my closet,
oh.
which I think is very telling.
Yes, it is, right? It's like a piece of your identity, right? That you were able to hold on to. Um, the love bombing, yes. Yep.
Love
The
bombing, showering me in praise when I needed it,
and
when I
then,
needed him,
yep.
and then instantly taking that away.
Yes. Um,
and just flipping on a dime.
yeah.
He could say, I love you the same hour he also said, I can't be with you. You're too good for me and I need to leave this earth.
Mm. Right. The whiplash. That's something that abusers seem to be like really, really crafting about is like the whiplash of manipulation. Um, it's so crazy because one of the episodes that I recorded, I have like this relationship that you and I have been talking about. And then there's like another episode I record of a bunch of just different experiences. And one of those experiences, that abuser hit me up like 2 days ago, just out of the fucking blue. And it was a very short text correspondence, but they literally went through like every means of manipulation. It was so interesting. I was like, wow,
Wow.
like look at this whiplash of fucking manipulation that's going on. Like,
Look at
wow.
this textbook example.
Right? I was like, wow, this is really like fascinating, right? Because that's where I am with that. But there's also something that's really prominent about abusers that I'm noticing from talking to people, and it doesn't matter what type of abuse, it's consistent. It's the dream killer. It's whatever you
Mm,
love, whatever you like, they shit on it. So if
yes,
you're like, I love being a
constantly.
dancer, and they want to go after that, they'll shit on it and be like, you're never gonna do that. You're not good enough to do it, like whatever that is. Or they poo poo it, or they're like, oh, is this better for you? You're too good for that, or whatever. If you there's something you like, look at this dress I got. Like, oh, you don't look good. Like it's just
Hmm.
the shitting on things that you love is very consistent of abusers. So I say that out loud to point it out so that if you didn't hear it when she said it, you'll hear it when I say it, hopefully. If someone is shitting on things you love, that's a big ass red flag.
Yes. And the fact that in the course of a year, we went from bonding over our love of dance to him telling me how much of a terrible dancer I am and that I'm never going to go to a musical theater, or acting program. I'm never going to become a professional dancer. Like everything I love and cherish is part of me,
Mm-hmm.
and to disparage it like
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
feels personal. And that's often because it is.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Big time. And one thing I want to point out, too, is, and I think you can very much verify this, is the amount of energy spent on these relationships is all encompassing. The amount of
Yes.
energy it takes to continuously make sure someone's okay, to make sure you're okay, to like engage and to keep calling, to be, your mind is always in a different place, whether it is tending to the fictional drama that this person has created, or this fictional problem that you need to somehow fix, or if it's the what am I eating to make sure that I am, contributing to a body type that this person is going to find appealing,
Mm-hmm.
whether it is, which also does really crazy things to your brain as far as anxiety, as far as obsessive compulsive. Like basically, the less you eat, the more obsessive compulsive and anxious your brain gets. That's science. And so there's an immense amount of energy that is expended in these relationships. Um, and it really kind of makes you kind of incapable of your true potential, I feel like.
It takes your energy and attention away from everything else.
Right.
It
Yeah.
does become all encompassing. And I think one of the biggest tools that manipulators have is the isolation
Mm-hmm.
of that person.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that breaking out of that isolation is one of the only ways to stop the cycle of abuse.
Mm-hmm.
Because as soon as you tell another person who's out of the eye of that storm just the basic circumstances of what's happening, every red flag in their body is going to go
Mm-hmm.
off and they're going to tell you.
Yeah.
And if telling someone else what's going on scares you, you know you're in a bad place.
What a brilliant thing to say. If telling someone else what's going on scares you, you're in a bad place. That is
Mm-hmm.
so profound because that is exactly what it is. But for some reason, when everything's living in our head, it's so loud. The minute it comes out of our mouth, our head starts to get quiet. But to do that actual thing to go from head to mouth, like, is very scary. And if it's very scary,
It's terrifying.
there's something there, right? And so the
Hmm.
thing you need to do is the thing you don't want to do, which is tell some people. And it's hard because, like,
Anyone.
anyone. And sometimes the first person you tell is not the right person. Sometimes that first person is like someone who's like, well, that's no big deal, or they, like, there's a lot of times when people are first telling about their abuse, unfortunately they get someone who is not really willing to help, or a soft place for them to hear it. So if that's the case, that doesn't have to be the end of it. Oh, I told one person and they don't care. Tell one more person, tell another
Hmm.
person, tell another person. Because you're right, the isolation, like, you're as sick as your secrets, it thrives in darkness. And I
Yes.
I don't remember having, like, I had friends, but when I was in this relationship, I all of my friends were not close anymore. Like, this
Mm.
relationship was my soul relationship. Like, I had a couple friends I talked to a little bit, but I was nowhere near as invested in them as I was in this relationship, and I was terribly afraid to tell them how things really were.
My friends did not like him, and they would tell me, but I didn't want to listen, and
Right.
I eventually stopped telling them things because I
Right.
knew they wouldn't like it.
Right.
And that's when I knew, oh, this is a problem, but I don't know how to get myself out, and I'm very comfortable, and I know at least some of what's going on in this confined
Mhm.
cage I've made for myself.
Mhm. Mhm.
And it's so easy to rather, to sit in that hell that you know rather than try to break out and go into the unknown.
Right.
It's so much scarier out there, but
Mhm.
it's worth it out there.
Well, especially if someone's like wielding suicide every time you decide to, like, like, oh, well, I want to break up, and it's like, well, I'm going to kill myself. That kind of stuff. That stuff happens, and it's like, how then do you get out? It's like, that's beyond even comfort if you're afraid that they're going to do something.
And he would tell me that
Yeah.
every time I tried to have a serious conversation, it would become, I'm going to hurt myself, I'm going to kill myself.
Hmm.
And it's hard to argue with that.
No shit. If you're an empathetic person, you're not going to be like, oh, well, do it, I dare you. Like, no one's going to
Yeah,
do it.
like, of course I'm gonna stick around. Of course I'm gonna help you. Like, I give a shit.
Hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
I don't know who wouldn't.
Yeah, and I wish there was a little bit more in the cultural discourse, like, pop culture discourse about that type of manipulation in relationships. Like, how do teens navigate that? Because it is such a familiar manipulation tactic. And there's also people who genuinely are struggling with self-harm. So it's like, how do people navigate this? I'm going to look around and see if I can find any links to add to this
Right,
episode, because I think it's a really important conversation and it needs some how to's, because,
right.
I mean, how did you eventually get out of this? Like, how did you set yourself free?
The final straw for me was my prom night.
Okay.
We started with the dress. Well, actually, we started with promposals, which are,
Hmm.
I don't know if they're a thing in high school anymore, but they were very, very big when I was in high school to make some kind of sign,
Like a grand
to,
gesture.
yeah, to have some kind of gesture.
Right.
And at this point, we'd been dating almost a year, and I didn't really ask for much as a partner, but I just said, I really want you to ask me to prom.
Hmm.
Even if it's a rose and no one else sees, I don't care. I just want something. And he just kept telling me, oh, I don't want to go, and I don't want to do this, and why can't you just go with your friends? And why do I, like, don't you know I love you? And so I asked him, I made a sign, and I had my friend recording it from behind the bushes. And I will never delete the video because it's me just being so excited. Like, will you go to prom with me? And him walking up and being like, I already told you I'd go with you.
Mm.
And you can see my face fall.
Right. The disappointment.
And that was the beginning of the end for me of like, this is something that's important to me.
Mm-hmm.
And right from the get-go, that, not liking my dress, making me buy a new one.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of prom night, he wouldn't dance with me.
Mm.
He would just be with his friends. He didn't want to be there, and he made that known.
Mm-hmm.
And at the after party, I made it very clear, I don't want to drink. You do whatever you want. Whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And he forced a shot of vodka down my throat.
What?
He made it a game with other people in the room.
He
He
forces you to take a
forces my
shot.
mouth open and forces me to take a shot that I don't want. And then that night, everyone's sleeping. All these drunk teenagers are sleeping in one big living room on various floors and sofas. And in the middle of the night, he's trying to get me to have sex with him. And I'm like, 10 of our friends are like right here. No.
Mm-hmm.
And that whole night was just the final straw for me of I've had this feeling that this is bad. My friends don't like him. My mom doesn't like him. Like, I don't even like him. I love him, but I don't like him. I
Great
feel like
distinction.
he's something I have to take care of.
Mm.
And I love him like someone should love a plant,
Mm.
not like how you love a person.
Mm-hmm.
And so once I realized that, no matter what he said, I was going to break up with him.
Mm-hmm.
And the actual event of breaking up, I don't remember it that well. It happened in a park, like behind a wired chain link fence. And I just remember being in the middle of the forest and being like, I can't do this anymore. I'm out. I'm out. And I remember him having a very calm reaction.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until a day, a day or two went by that then I started getting drunk calls and text messages calling me a used sex toy, that it wasn't going to be long before I was back with him. A month or so later, when I did date someone else, he started texting that person, have fun with my used sex toy. And it eventually stopped. I'm honestly very fuzzy on the end of that whole relationship, probably for some self-protecting reasons.
Mm-hmm.
But once I ended it, I was like, this was bad. And I can fully recognize it now that I am no longer with this person. But when I was in it and trying to get out, the only thing that I think worked was the fear of having to tell someone about it.
Mm.
Because that was what made me realize this is bad.
Right.
And sometimes it can be years before you even realize this is bad.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But once you realize it's bad, that has to be some kind of launching point, I think.
I think it's really poignant what you're saying. I think it's a really good marker for how deep in the shit you might be. I
Right.
think it's an easy marker. If telling something that happened in your relationship makes you feel scared to tell them because you're afraid of their response, that's a really, really, really poignant moment of reflection. And, you know, it's probably time to say something to someone trusted. I think it's really what's the word I'm looking for? The metaphor of you remembering a chain link fence,
Hmm.
right? Like you're like, I'm in the forest, I remember a fence, right? It's like
Specifically a chain link
chain
one
link
in
fence, right?
this.
Like it's like a omen of like your captivity, or like the
Right.
right, like this when you tell that story,
Like
that
a
stood out to me.
feeling like a caged bird.
Right. Or
Yeah.
like that you notice it,
Yeah.
but you're in the forest. So you're like kind of in this duality of like
Hmm.
escaping this
But you
situation.
can't.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
and I
like
truly,
Katniss up to the end of the
yeah,
District 12 fence.
totally, totally. And I think he fully didn't believe that you were really leaving. That's why he was so calm. And
Probably.
then like 24 to 48 hours later, the things that always worked didn't work. You didn't come back running, and then it was like time to phase two. Like if you noticed someone trying to manipulate, if you can really watch it as an observer, when you're involved in it, it's really terrible and it's hard to see for what it is. When you start to get outside of it, you can start to see that it happens in like waves, much like a 2 or 3 year old. Is
Right.
trying to get what they want. They start with like whining. When that doesn't work, they act really nice and they say please. And when that doesn't work, they cry. And when that doesn't work, they rage. And when that doesn't work, they become really nice again. And when that doesn't work, it's like this. It just keeps it's
Tactic
like
by
all these
tactic.
different
Yeah.
manipulation tactics, right? It's like I'm a victim, oh, I was joking, right? The gaslighting, or oh, like
Oh, so
just
much. I was just joking.
oh, yeah, yeah,
So much of that.
to say the things that they want to say to break you down, and then it's like you're overreacting because I was just joking. Like, why can't you just take a joke? I'm not
I
serious.
remember him telling me at one point, your clit is too sensitive. And I was like, what is it supposed to be?
That's a good thing.
Like,
Nobody wants an insensitive
it's
clit. Like,
supposed to
that's
be
not a good
sensitive.
thing. That's not
That's
a good thing.
kind of like the point of it.
Yeah. So yeah, just
That also should
anything.
have been a red flag.
Yeah, but I mean, it's like anything when you're younger, like especially you know being a teenager. There's so much, you know, self consciousness that comes with that, especially when you're exploring your sexuality. It's such a vulnerable place to be in. To have someone say anything that isn't positive can really stick with you for a long time,
Right.
you know?
I can still remember, vividly remember the text messages from him calling me, used and disposable, and the body shaming of you look fat in this, you look ugly in this, you look whatever. I can all vividly remember all of those things. What I don't vividly remember is the nice things,
Right. Yeah.
which is pretty telling. But the nice things are what got me to fall for him.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's something our brains do as human beings to survive is we hyper remember negativity to keep us alive, right? As a
Right.
species, if we remember that a lion can kill us, we need to remember that more than, a bird will be nice to us. Like it's like fuck the bird, where's the lion, right? Like it's actually a survival thing. So the way our brains work. So yeah, when you are experiencing abuse, you may hold on to a memory of someone being different and like really hold on to that as refuge. But after the fact, you are only majority of the things you're going to remember are the traumatizing ones. At least that's how I
Right.
have remembered mine. Um, and I also,
And often the memory of that kindness is what keeps you
right, it only
near the
fuels,
lion.
yeah, it only fuels you to like, okay, well, they used to, I remember them differently and I just want to get back to that place, of them
Right.
being like that. And it's not who they really are. So they can't get back there.
No, that
Um,
that person is not there.
Yeah, it was a
That's
fallacy to
not a real
begin with.
person.
No, it's not real. It's not a real person. I also want to touch on because we did talk about your being non-binary and they them pronouns. When you were in high school, did you identify as a female? Did you not? Were you just like trying to figure it
Oh,
out?
I didn't figure. I'm still figuring out the gender thing day by day. That is a beautiful daily exploration
Love it.
that I feel so lucky to be on.
Yeah.
In high school, I was a girl. I thought I was straight. I thought I wasn't straight,
Right.
but I told everyone I was straight
Right, of course. Yeah. Yeah.
because I thought I was.
Well, it keeps you safer. Why,
Keeps you
Yeah,
safer,
yeah.
all that fun stuff. Um, it wasn't until COVID really that A, I started having a better relationship with sex,
Mhm.
and B, I started realizing, I might not be a woman like I thought I was.
Right, you're feeling more flexible in this area of not being so finite in one area.
And I think it is very telling that once I did get in touch with my body in
Mhm.
that way and have relationships that empowered me better and came with a lot of the therapy of unpacking that kind of sexual trauma.
Mhm.
Um, Discovering that was what led me to, oh, I don't feel like a woman. I don't feel like that is the box I'm in.
Mhm.
I really think it's interesting how sexuality and gender can work like that.
Right.
And in feeling more comfortable with my body is what led me to this exploration and this discovery.
I love it. And the reason I even like poke at it is because I just want to highlight what you had said, that he would call you a used sex toy. That's something you say to a woman only. You don't say that to a man.
Right.
No one
No,
can.
a man
No,
is never
no,
called that.
no. A man is never called that. It's not a threat to him. A man
No,
having multiple sexual partners is not a source of shame like it is for a woman. Whether or not,
right,
regardless of how she actually feels about it, what is put on her about it, right? Like
right.
Mother Mary, the Madonna, being the perfect woman is a woman who can get pregnant without having sex, right? So she's pure. She's 100% pure. That's the Madonna, the Mother Mary, right?
Yes.
Everybody else is a fucking whore, or can be, or has the potential to be. You know what I'm saying? So
Right.
it's like, I want to point that out because it's so pointedly like slander towards a woman, knowing exactly that
Yes.
that is specific shame and slander towards a woman, that would never be something he could actually use for a man. Like
And this
it
was
just wouldn't work.
a very gendered relationship. I was very much a girl in this,
Mm-hmm.
and he was very much a guy in this.
Mm-hmm.
But what's interesting is I was attracted to the fact that he told me he was bisexual.
Mm.
That was one of the things I was like, oh, I'm really interested in that. I like you as a friend.
Mm-hmm.
And what interested me as a person was his queerness, or it might have been a lie. I honestly
Mm.
don't know.
Yeah, it's
Um,
hard to say with someone that is
it's
probably
hard to say
lying
with
a
someone like
lot.
that
Yeah.
what he was actually lying and telling the truth about. Oh, I just like lost my train of thought.
Sorry. So him being bisexual was something that really
Oh,
enticed you. You
yes.
liked that freedom, and then, but it's hard to know if that was true or not. But then
I love that freedom.
in this
I
relationship,
was
it was
attracted
very
to that.
traditional, gendered.
Yes. Thank you. There it was. Tradition. Tradition. Um, it was a very gendered relationship. And I went to an all girls school,
Mm.
and that was very much a part of the mentality was we are women and this is what women do and this is what guys do and boys will be boys
Mm.
and girls will be girls.
Mm.
And we had the classic, girls would break dress code and the male teachers were the ones correcting it.
Yikes.
Weird.
Mm-hmm.
Weird. You're
Gross.
50, she's
Gross.
15.
Stop looking at spaghetti straps. No one cares.
Are we not going to talk about that?
Yeah.
Like, that's
Yeah.
freaking weird.
Yeah. It's
You
weird.
probably shouldn't teach at a school.
Yes. Probably not. Yeah.
So we were already in that culture of
Right.
gender and feeling like I want to be a girlfriend and you want to be a boyfriend, and now we're linked up and paired, and this is what we're going to do.
Mm-hmm.
Very much in that culture.
Mm-hmm.
And then getting out of it, going to college, I went to NYU, and it was very free in all
Mm-hmm.
the ways except financially. But,
Mm-hmm.
but in every other regard,
Right.
it was like very sexually freeing, you know, taking all these classes and meeting cool people and going
Mm-hmm.
cool places. So having that time totally away from all of these characters in that story, having that experience in New York, realizing I don't like living here and I want to do all these things, but maybe somewhere closer to home,
Mm-hmm.
led me to LA. And those relationships in the past post college years are what have led me to being like, oh, I'm not a woman. I don't know what. It's a gray area,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not male, it's not female. And if those are the only two boxes, I'm out.
Right. I'm going to opt out.
And I'm still trying to figure out what that box,
Right.
that secret third box is.
Right. 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 Yeah. I love
But
it.
there is so much of a freer relationship with my own body. And I think that has allowed for all of this
Mm-hmm.
gender clarity to come through of, oh, no, there were signs of this as a kid. There were signs of this as a teenager that I wasn't paying attention to,
Mm-hmm.
but were very much steeped into me.
Mm-hmm. I love that through like basically unlocking this feeling that you don't actually fit one of these boxes helped you unlock a bunch of other things that you hadn't been able to really digest.
Yes,
I love that.
1,000%. A
And
healthy
so,
sex life leads to a good life.
yes. Yeah, and depending on how that started out for us or how that's come together, we may need some healing in that area and some recovery. So you talked about therapy. You've talked about telling people, being transparent, right? Like if something feels like a secret, that's probably a red flag, which I think is absolutely right on. Is there anything else that you want, like that has helped you in your process, or consequently something that didn't help that you're like, this is what didn't help, because sometimes that
Hmm.
helps find what does.
Of this is what didn't help versus this is what did. Um, what did help was finally having the courage to talk to my friends
Mm-hmm.
and a little bit even with my mom of what was going on. Not being able to tell my mom things was, oh, this is not good. Feeling like I can't tell my best friend this,
Right.
this is not good. But once I did tell them, they were very adamant about, we love you, we want you safe, and because of that, you need to end this.
Mm-hmm.
And I was very fortunate to have those loving people in my life to tell me that
Mm-hmm.
and to say that. And they were people I trusted enough to listen.
Right. And I think it was
I've
probably,
had friends who I've had to be that person and
oh,
say,
yay. Mm-hmm.
this isn't good for you and you should go.
Mm-hmm.
And getting them to listen,
Mm-hmm.
leading a horse to water
Yes.
sometimes.
So this is the thing I've noticed is that when you when you finally got the courage to confide in your mother, parents, people close to you,
Mm-hmm.
you must have been at a point where you were ready and just needed that extra support. Because I have
Yeah, to
noticed that,
say this is right for
right,
you,
right.
you can do it.
Because I have noticed, and what I do now is if I notice that someone's in an unhealthy relationship, I am happy to listen to their experience, validate it, and be someone who is there to listen and support. But I also know how tricky these relationships are. And I know that it's probably common they're going to go back quite a few times before they
Yes.
decide to finally leave. So I usually just kind of like really try to keep nothing on it and be like,
Yes.
I'm here when you need, I'm here what you need. If you need a place to crash, if you need a place to be safe, like think of me. But, really, I try not to give any advice or suggestion in that way because I just know that sometimes then it also creates like a cycle of shame because they've told me and then they're like ashamed of it because they'll go back and then they'll leave and then they'll
Right.
go back, that kind of thing. But I'm so glad you got that courage. It must have been like a really good timing too to tell them because you just needed that extra support and like that
Yeah.
guidance and you were ready to hear it. The timing is everything. I love that.
Yeah.
So that
Having
helped
people in
you.
your corner.
Yes, having people in your corner helps. Therapy helps. Telling people those red flags helps. Um, and I don't know if
But it's
anything.
natural to feel like you're in survival mode and just need to flee.
Yeah.
Was
Yeah.
it flight, freeze, fawn?
Yes, yes. Fight, flight,
Um,
freeze, fawn. Fight, flight, freeze, fawn. I think those are the ones.
I feel like there's a fifth. There might be more. I don't remember.
Fight, yeah. Fight or flight. There's freeze, and then there's fawn, which is usually like, for people who aren't as familiar with fawn, it's like kind of Stockholm syndrome where you like appease your abuser. So
People
there's
pleaser. Very people
fighting.
pleaser.
Yep. There's fighting. There's flighting where you just peace out. There's freezing where you don't do anything, and there's fawning where you almost like can, like entice, please, all
You
those
kind of
things.
okay the
Yes.
abuse.
Yeah.
You say
Endear
it's
them.
okay. It's
Yeah.
okay. I can endure this.
Yeah. You kind of become very endearing to them. You
Right.
cater to them. Yeah. I definitely. I did a lot of fawning in my life. A lot of fawning.
Me too.
Yeah. The
Me
people
as
pleasing
well.
is deep with me, which doesn't. If you know me like observationally, you might not think that, but unfortunately, it's definitely deep with me. All right. I have one last question for you. So on the pod, I always do at the end of the show, I say, I don't give suggestion, but sometimes,
Hmm.
sorry, I don't give advice, but oftentimes I ask for suggestion, right? So
Okay.
we don't give advice on the pod, but we might give suggestions. So
A
is there,
suggestion.
yes, is there any suggestion that you have for someone who might be suffering in a situation like yours? And it can be a repeat of what you've already said, but is there any
Hmm.
suggestion you have for someone who's suffering in a similar circumstance?
If it's possible to get even one day away from all of it, see how much peace that brings you, and know that can be possible every day.
Mm,
That's not always possible for everyone. It might be an hour away from the abuser, it might be 10 minutes. But if you can find that peace in yourself, it's going to be possible out there
mm-hmm.
because you're kind of all you have when you get out.
Mm-hmm.
And if no one can do it for you, you're going to have to do it for you.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think getting in touch with yourself and seeing your future and your life, that just has to become the priority and the center and the focus, because that's what's going to get you to get yourself out. The abuser's never going to leave. They're just not. You're going to have to do it. I feel like
Excellent.
it's lame to be like, Nike, just do it. But like,
Yeah.
that's kind of what it feels like
Yeah.
sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. That's really, really good advice. Come back to yourself, right? Find that peace, even if it's just for a second, and know that that can be forever if you're willing to
Mm-hmm.
get out.
Yeah.
Cat Heinen, thank you so much for having the
Thank you for
courage
having me.
to share your experience. And I really, really relate to it. You and I have always been very, intense in our meetings, and we don't talk about the weather. You and we go straight into it, and I love that. It's my
Straight
favorite.
in.
Some of my favorite types of
I am the
relationships.
storm.
Yeah, yeah. I can't thank you enough for being on the pod.
Thank you for having me. If this has helped even one person, that's all this is for.
And I hope that one person hits you up about it. Like
Yes.
I always want to say on the podcast, like, hit people up. Like, it's very weird to tell your story and then hear nothing, even if people have heard it and
Right.
it resonates. It's very weird. It's like, okay, I guess I just said that. But it's like really lovely when someone takes the time to be like, hey, you don't even have to say something about yourself. You could be like, hey, I really enjoyed your episode, or like, hey, I heard you and
Right.
I relate. You don't have to go
Mm-hmm.
there, but it's like always really nice. So I always hope that people hit up the people on the pod and tell them. So I'm going to throw that out there now for people who are listening. Like, it's very helpful.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm on Instagram. We'll see for how long I'm
I
not
know,
on
right?
TikTok.
I know. Oh, I know. Like I usually put some social media, like tags so that people can try to find people to like give them
Beautiful.
feedback or whatever. So thank you so much.
Amazing. Well, thank you for having me.